Welcome to the Mystery Archive. This is the home of forgotten stories, unexplained events, and, well, some of the strangest anomalies that history has left behind. Today we're diving into one of the most perplexing enigmas in modern history, the complete and utter disappearance of an entire town. Imagine a community where children played in the streets, where shopkeepers greeted neighbors by name, where life just sort of hummed with the ordinary rhythm of human existence. Then, without warning, without any explanation, that town simply ceased to exist. Not through war, not through natural disaster in the conventional sense, but through something far more unsettling. This isn't the stuff of campfire tales or urban legends. This is documented reality, and honestly, it demands our attention. The town in question is Anjikuni, a small Inuit fishing village in the Nunavut territory of Canada, though, various accounts place similar disappearances across the remote regions of our world. In 1930, a trapper named Joe LaBelle allegedly arrived at this settlement expecting the usual warm welcome and bustling activity that characterized these tight-knit communities. Instead, he found something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Absolute silence. The kayaks were still tied at the shore. Rifles, precious possessions in these harsh lands, remained propped against cabin walls. Food sat on tables, some of it still in pots over long, cold fires. But every single person, from the elders to the children, had vanished without a trace. What makes this case particularly chilling is the absence of signs of struggle or panic. This wasn't an evacuation. There were no footprints leading away into the snow, no indication that the residents had packed belongings or prepared for a journey. The sled dogs, typically the lifeblood of Arctic communities, were found dead, not from starvation or exposure, but tethered beneath snow, as though someone or something had deliberately buried them. The village graveyard had been disturbed, with graves opened and bodies removed, adding a macabre dimension to an already inexplicable situation. Initial reports to the Royal Canadian Mounted Police triggered searches, but investigators found themselves confronting a mystery that defied every logical explanation they could muster. Historical documentation of the Anjikuni case proves frustratingly sparse and contradictory, which itself becomes part of the mystery. Official RCMP records from 1930 contain only fragmentary mentions of investigations in the region, with some researchers questioning whether the incident occurred exactly as reported or whether it represents an amalgamation of several smaller disappearances and local folklore that merged over time. What separates the Anjikuni case from simple migration is the testimony of those who lived in surrounding areas. Inuit oral histories speak of lights in the sky on the night of the disappearance, of a strange humming sound that permeated the air, and of an overwhelming sense of dread that kept neighboring communities from approaching the village for days. Contemporary newspapers seized upon the story with, these sensational headlines, but the remoteness of the location meant that only a handful of journalists actually made the journey to the site. The theories proposed at the time, they ranged from mass kidnapping by rival groups to, perhaps, a voluntary departure in search of better hunting grounds. Yet, none of these explanations really addressed the abandoned possessions, the dead dogs, or the, disturbed graves. Modern researchers who approach the Anjikuni mystery use methodologies that frankly would have been unimaginable back in 1930. Archival investigations have turned up Hudson's Bay Company trading records, which documented regular interactions with settlements in the region. But interestingly, these records contain puzzling gaps around the alleged disappearance period. Some records just, simply stop with no explanation for the sudden cessation of trade with certain communities. The most prosaic explanation suggests that Anjikuni's residents relocated voluntarily, perhaps driven by poor hunting conditions or social conflicts, and that the dramatic details of the discovery grew with repeated telling. But, this theory struggles to account for why a community would abandon valuable possessions and leave their dogs to die, behaviors completely antithetical to survival in Arctic conditions. The disturbed graves, if accurately reported, remain unexplained under this scenario. The Anjikuni case, whether precisely as reported or representing a constellation of related disappearances, reminds us that our world still harbors genuine unknowns. Indigenous communities across the Arctic experienced dramatic upheavals during the 20th century, many inadequately documented, many involving tragic losses that were never properly investigated or explained. The mystery forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about whose stories get recorded, whose disappearances matter in official histories, and how easily human lives can slip through the cracks of bureaucratic record-keeping. What happened to those people? Were they victims of forces we understand but cannot prove? Or does their fate involve something genuinely outside our current knowledge? The questions remain, suspended in the frigid air of the Canadian North, waiting for new evidence, new methodologies, or perhaps simply for someone to ask the right questions. If this mystery has captured your imagination, if you find yourself drawn to the unexplained and the forgotten, then subscribe to the Mystery Archive. Share this investigation with others who appreciate history's darker corners and unresolved enigmas. Together, we can keep these stories alive, these questions active, and perhaps, just perhaps, we might one day find answers where others found only silence.